The silent ranch of the desert sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty trail that wound through Monument Valley. Red rocks jutted from the earth like ancient monuments, their shadows offering little relief from the blazing afternoon heat. The silence was complete save for the whisper of wind through sagebrush and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Sarah McKenna had been walking for 3 days now, her feet bleeding inside worn boots, her lips cracked from thirst. The wooden sign hung around her neck like a millstone, its crude letters spelling out a condemnation that had become her reality. Useless mouth. The rope chafed against her sunburned skin, but she no longer had the strength to adjust it. She had trusted the wrong people. The wagon train heading west had seemed like salvation when she'd lost everything back in Kansas. Her husband dead from fever, her farm foreclosed. She'd sold her last possessions for passage to California. But when supplies ran low and tempers grew short, the other travelers had turned on her. A woman alone, they said, was nothing but dead weight, a burden, a useless mouth to feed. They'd left her tied to this gnarled juniper tree at dawn, taking her water and what little food she had left. She'd managed to work free of the ropes by midday, but the damage was done. She was alone in the vastness of the high desert with no horse, no supplies, and no hope. Now, as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sarah stumbled again. This time she didn't get up. The sand was warm against her cheek, and she closed her eyes, welcoming the darkness that crept in at the edges of her vision. That was when she heard the hoofbeats, slow and steady. They grew closer. Sarah opened her eyes to see a figure approaching, on horseback, silhouetted against the dying light. The rider was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. He rode with the easy grace of someone who had spent his life in the saddle. The man dismounted a few feet away, his boots making soft sounds in the sand. He was older than Sarah had first thought, perhaps 40, with weathered skin and kind eyes, the color of storm clouds. He knelt beside her without speaking, his movements gentle as he lifted her head and brought a canteen to her lips. The water was cool and sweet, and Sarah drank gratefully, though he was careful not to let her have too much too quickly. When she had finished, he helped her sit up, his strong hands supporting her trembling frame. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man nodded but said nothing. He studied the sign around her neck, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. With careful fingers, he untied the rope and cast the cruel wooden placard aside. Then, without a word, he lifted Sarah in his arms and placed her gently on his horse. The ride to his ranch took nearly an hour. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the solid warmth of the man behind her. When they arrived, she saw a simple but well-maintained homestead. Nestled in a valley between towering red cliffs, there was a small house, a barn, and corrals where horses grazed peacefully in the evening light. The man carried her inside and laid her on a soft bed in a spare room. He brought her more water, along with a bowl of simple but nourishing soup. Sarah ate slowly, savoring every spoonful. When she had finished, exhaustion claimed her and she slept deeply for the first time in days. She woke to the sound of roosters, crowing and sunlight streaming through clean windows. Her mysterious rescuer was nowhere to be seen, but fresh clothes had been laid out for her, along with a basin of warm water for washing. The clothes were simple but well made, and they fit her surprisingly well. Sarah found the man in the barn, tending to a mare that was about to foal. He looked up as she approached, nodding in acknowledgement but still not speaking. She watched as he worked, his hands gentle and sure. When the foal was born, wet and wobbling on stick-thin legs, Sarah felt tears of joy spring to her eyes. Days passed in this quiet rhythm. The man, whom Sarah learned from neighbors was called Thomas Whitmore, continued his daily routine without explaining her presence or asking about her past. He provided for her needs without question, but they rarely spoke beyond the necessities of daily life. Sarah began to help around the ranch, feeding chickens, tending the vegetable garden, and mending clothes. She found peace in the simple work, and slowly the wounds in her heart began to heal along with those on her body. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the cliffs in brilliant reds and golds, Thomas finally spoke. "Lost my wife 5 years ago," he said quietly. "Fever took her, same as yours, I reckon." He glanced at the ring Sarah still wore. "This place gets mighty quiet with just one person." Sarah nodded, understanding. "The wagon train said I was the burden, that I had nothing to offer." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Mare that birthed her foal the day you came. She'd been trying for 2 days. Nothing I did helped. But when you walked into that barn, she settled right down, delivered that foal easy as anything." Sarah looked at him in surprise. "Animals know," Thomas continued. "They can sense a good heart. That mare knew what those wagon train folks couldn't see." He turned to face her fully. "You got healing hands, Sarah, and this old ranch could use some healing." As the weeks turned to months, Sarah found her place in the small community. She helped deliver babies, tended the sick, and brought comfort to those who needed it. Thomas, who had been right about her gift, though she had never thought of it that way before. The cruel sign that had labeled her a useless mouth was long gone. burned in the fireplace on a cold night. In its place grew something far more valuable, a sense of purpose, of belonging, of being truly seen and valued for who she was. One evening, as Sarah worked in her garden and Thomas mended fence nearby, she realized that she had found something she had never dared hope for. Not just survival, but a home. Not just shelter, but love growing slowly and surely like the vegetables in her well-tended garden. The desert that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving now felt like sanctuary, and the silent rancher who had found her at her lowest point had given her the greatest gift of all, the chance to discover that she was never useless, never a burden. She was exactly where she belonged.